Hello everyone, watch this review here with a look at Boba Fett from the Star Wars Vintage Collection. Now, in the immortal words of Han Solo, Boba Fett, where's Boba Fett? Now, although, Han was obviously like half blind when he said that, the words couldn't possibly be more true because it seems like every other character from this line is apparently a peg warmer compared to Boba Fett. You'll see like maybe 12 of each other character in stores and then not a single Boba Fett, either because they sell out quick or they don't package as many. Not sure which it is, but either way, it's annoying. But I ended up picking this one up, although he has a paint defect on the helmet, and then it looks like his little thing there is bent. I think because the helmet popped up in pack. Just because I have a very strong hunch I will never see this figure in stores again. Now, as previously mentioned, there's this free Boba Fett mail-in offer, which completely ruins this cool vintage card because, if you peel it off, you're going to scratch the card probably. I mean, it would have been a lot nicer if they just tossed it on the plastic portion where you wouldn't damage that, but, if that wasn't bad enough, to actually redeem that offer, you have to cut apart the card, so you can't even save the stupid card. Which, it's just mind-boggling. Especially because for the other lines, they have, like, the UPC on the bottom of the package, or, Given that I've waited so long to pick one of these up, I really don't feel like starting this review with any negative comments, but it's going to be a little bit hard. So I'll start with one of the decent points. I feel that they did a pretty cool job on the paint and everything. So he definitely has the look really down, even if, it doesn't look to have as much paint detail as some of the others in the line. Sculpt-wise, too, kind of serviceable sculpt, and I like the fact that they have this really cool-looking cape, even if it is a cloth one. I mean, I imagine they could have done plastic just as easily, but you wouldn't get the frayed effect with plastic, and I feel that goes a long way in, showing the whole battle-tattered look of Boba Fett. Of course, first you have to wrinkle this up a bit just to get it more there, but now, on to the bad points. I'm really not impressed by how the articulation is on this one, and in some points the sculpt and the articulation just seems silly. Especially the fact that I gripe about this a lot, but it just doesn't make any sense that we have these hinged hips, and then we have ball joints at the knees. So, there's really not too much additional you can do with the ball-jointed knees versus ball-jointed hips. And, I don't know. The other big problem is, the way that his legs are sculpted. You'll notice that, one thigh goes all the way out to one side, and the other one comes only a little bit over. It's kind of mind-boggling, but Boba Fett's helmet is removable. Underneath, you can find out his secret identity. Bum bum bum. And I think it's a kind of nice touch, especially because when you stop to think about it, when you're trying to get the look up on figures, the actual head itself generally doesn't have too much articulation, like you can't get it to go really far up. This one, goes pretty far up, but once you put a helmet on and attach the helmet loosely, you can actually make the head look like it's facing up a lot further than it is. Did I just pop his head off? Yeah, I just popped his head off, but so that's a really nice touch. Phone! Alright, so that was a annoying interruption, but I also realized I need to change the visual settings on the iCam, but the other big problem I have is the fact that his jetpack just does not want to stay on. No matter how I place it, it seems to fall off pretty easily. Or just never really gets in there, or maybe it gets in the way of the cape. But the other benefit to doing a cloth cape is you can just physically put the cape over it. Or if you wanted, you could squeeze it under here, but if you squeezed it under here, if you actually turned on his jetpack, it would probably burn it up, so I imagine he probably keeps it over. Although I don't know why he wears a cape at all, considering the fact that these things just get in the way, but in terms of accessories, because the vintage line doesn't really have many, your only real accessories are this jetpack, his blaster rifle, then he's got a smaller pistol well hidden in this holster here. But again, it's a little bit tough to get out because he's got this belt. Shoot. Boom, boom. Technical difficulties, folks. Here we go. Of course, it's going to be really bent because the holster really isn't in the best place, and it's a thinner plastic. Let me just quickly run you through the actual amount of detail here. You'll notice that the mask here has little paint chips where they painted on another layer. It's not actual paint chips, but so the silver underneath the painted mask would be exposed. But you'll notice that mine, a little bit of that gets onto the visor. You'll also notice they have a physical dent here, like they do with many of the Boba Fett figures, and at some point I will compare this against the old Kenner line. You'll notice little studs here on the shoulder pads, the little Mandalorian symbol on his shoulder pad, which isn't entirely painted in, a little rocket launcher, the flamethrower, and it has the cord to the flamethrower here. Because it's sculpted in, it does occasionally get in the way of the articulation. On the chest plate area here, you'll notice little dents here and there, in addition to like little, pegs for something. Then the rest of it, you'll notice like little tears in the actual costume here, so there's metal underneath there. And it's like the paint's designed so it looks scraped on the knee pads. On the back, there's not as much variation here, but gives you a better look at the belt and stuff. And one of the disappointing facts is that the fabric portions look more like plastic than fabric. And they really could have gone and painted those to give it a more realistic look. In terms of articulation, let me just quickly run through that, because a lot of his articulation is also sort of impeded. Or not so much impeded, but when you're trying to actually maneuver it, it seems to do weird stuff. But this wrist here doesn't seem to be able to rotate, but I thought the other one could. Oh, right, it rotates the forearms, right. My bad. Which is, again, a more concealed point, and where the sculpt goes on to the wrists, I can kind of understand that. But when you're actually moving the elbow here, the problem is if you move it too far up, you begin to almost snap the actual forearm portion. Normal ball-jointed shoulder. Now on this arm you have a slight impediment due to the sculpting here. It's not as big as you'd think, but I get the feeling that you're kind of twisting the plastic and eventually that might break. Especially if you try twisting around to the side. Already talked about the head, but the waist rotates. Then, again, leg hinged, ball joint here at the knee, and then ball joint here at the foot. It doesn't really go forward all that much, just do the sculpt, but quick size comparison here. Let's bring in the Marvel Universe Classic Armor Iron Man for those who don't collect Star Wars figures. Dengar from the Vintage line, who honestly I think looks quite a bit better just in terms of overall effect. But I do somewhat like the Boba Fett, and Bosk from the Saga Legends line. So obviously Boba Fett's a bit on the smaller side. I don't know if he is or isn't canonically, just because I can't remember these things offhand. Although at the end of the day, this figure definitely has a lot of problems. It's really nothing earth-shattering. It's just a lot of little things that they really could have done better. And I imagine most people will pick him up simply because he's Boba Fett, bounty hunter extraordinaire, the man who captured Han Solo, and actually then proceeded to lose him after he was thawed out. And in the films, he does get a fair amount of face time in The Empire Strikes Back, and a little bit of time in the Return of the Jedi. He also briefly appears in Clone Wars as Jango Fett's clone and sees Daddy get decapitated, so if you're ever wondering why this guy has so many issues. Actually, one more figure I could toss in here, just for a comparison's sake, is this Mandalorian character from the Clone Wars series, which I will mention by name. Just for a comparison of like how the armor looks between the two lines. It's a completely different take. So, there's definitely a more rounded effect with this figure as opposed to... Which is actually kind of ironic, because most of the effects are kind of square on them. Versus Boba Fett, but I figured, it's worth tossing in there. But yeah, until next time, folks. Always remember to not bend your Wookiees.